So when into the future, this is what will be known as unless it gets voted out. So, all right. There's a bit of an echo. There's maybe some technical difficulties.
We're professionals. We're just gonna walk. We're gonna go right through this.
Yeah. It's like all those guys at the playoff games who have the headphones on and they sound like they're drunk because they're trying to avoid the echo. But yeah. So on top of roofing podcast, take them all off.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way you
We good?
Yeah.
Okay. So everything sounds normal.
Alrighty.
All right. So we're back. More on the lines of roofing. Last time it was more getting to know Eric and I, and this time along the lines of education, which we spoke so much about last time, is we want to get different perspectives and ideas and inspiration, whatever it might be, from various outlooks. And so this time we have Adam Denne. So as I mentioned, the dark side. So from a contractor's perspective, I think most confrontation that all contractors, or at least roofing contractors rather, will speak to is the adjuster. So Adam is an adjuster currently. He's a staff adjuster, and so he's been doing this with Adam pushing 20 years.
Getting close. Getting close. Got my license in 05, started in 06.
Okay.
And it's funny you mention the dark side because it's kind of flipped. Because you guys are
We're the dark side.
well, I mean, it's not just not a new.
No, we're the good guys.
Well, there's no dark.
There is no dark, and that's true. And that's why we wanted Adam here for sure. Is we're all doing a job, and Adam is no different. He works on behalf of whatever insurance carrier it may be, and the homeowner. I mean, he's there to protect the homeowner and whatever loss they might have gone through at the time. Obviously, we're speaking to it from a perspective of roof claims, but there's a number of things that can go on in a time of loss that he would come in and help with. So before we get started, I have a very, very serious question to both of you. This is serious. So lock in on this. Okay. So how did the female roofer get 1 million followers on TikTok?
What's the rating on this?
It's open.
It is. There's 3 people watching this, and all of them are on this podcast right now. So,
I feel like I've heard this one, but I don't want to. I don't know.
Adam,
I've never heard this before. No.
flashing,
That's right.
but on
Flashing.
Dad joke.
solid. Thank you, Ken and Phil, for sharing that with me. But I heard that, man, this is the perfect forum to share that. So, but anyway, so in all seriousness, I've known you for a minute now, and I'll explain how I got to know you shortly. But you have a whole lot of letters as titles behind your name. Please tell me what all those mean. Because I tell you what happens is, like, when I say call Adam Denne on my phone, like when I'm driving, and it'll call back or text back and it says Adam Denne. And it takes 30 minutes before I can ever say anything because it's telling me all your time. So explain what all that means and who you are.
Well, first off, you should edit my name.
I have.
Get rid of
I had.
Get rid of that. That's in there because when I first started, the carrier I started with said, we'll pay you to get designations in the insurance industry, and you'll get a bonus for that. And of course, being motivated that way, well, what can I do? I sat down and looked at all the designations that were available. So what you see on my letterhead right now is PCLS, FCLS, AAI, AIS. I believe is what it all is. And that's the first one is property claims law specialist.
Okay.
And then FCLS is a fraud claims law specialist.
Okay.
Both of those are through the same designation entity, and it's for basically an adjuster who wants to specialize in identifying fraud, red flag items. The other two, the AIS and the AAI, those are agent designations normally. So Brad would know more about that if you talk to him. But I got those not needing to get those. I got those because I wanted to know a little bit about what an agent might experience and how they would talk to their customers. And so it's associate in insurance services and accredited insurance advisor, I believe is what those are short for.
Okay. Those are some fancy handles. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so So all that aside, that's a lot of terms and a lot of things that you obviously do and have knowledge of. But at the end of the day, you're an adjuster. You're the guy who meets the homeowner and or contractors out on the job. So when that happens, let's go from inception, right? A homeowner calls in. Tell me the life cycle of a claim when it hits your desk. How does it get there, and what happens from there, from beginning to end? You just explain the process and how it should go. Now, whether it goes that way or not, I know there's various iterations that can happen, but what should happen?
Okay. Well, they can go through several avenues. It depends on the carrier, but most carriers allow for making a claim through the agent. You can make a claim online. You can phone it into the 800 number or the 888 number or the 886 number. That's called the first notice of loss, FNOL. And so you'll get that information. The carrier will receive that from one of those avenues, and they'll create a claim. And they'll ask multiple questions. And the person receiving that claim, whether it be verbally on the phone or if it's someone in the office on the other end of the computer, they're not a licensed adjuster in most cases. They're not required to be because they're not handling the claim or adjusting the claim or advising of coverage. So they're just customer service advocate or however
They're getting into your inbox, essentially.
Additional information.
They bring it into the claim system and create a claim number.
Okay.
And then it varies by company at that point how it gets to my desk. So the carrier I work for, what'll happen is it's kind of funny. I'm on a catastrophe team, and so I only get activated when there's a spike in claims. So there's too many claims in one area, they'll bring us in. And so with my carrier, that claim that gets called in will immediately go to an independent adjuster. And
Okay.
for those who don't know,
I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but I think this is confusing, maybe even early on in people's career on roofing. There are various types of adjusters. And you said it there. There's cat team guys, there's staffers, there's independents. So before you get too far into it, I guess, could you explain, like,
yeah.
have you been on those various sides, and what are those various sides, and how is it you now sit on the cat team?
So I've always been a staff catastrophe adjuster. So
Okay.
a staff adjuster means I work for the carrier. The big names you're aware of, State Farm, Farmers, Allstate, Progressive, all those companies. They have staff adjusters. I mean, you're a W-2 employee. They can also hire independent adjusters, which are called IAs.
Mhm.
The IAs are the same license, but they work for generally an intermediary company, like a Pilot or well, there's dozens, Renfro, yeah,
Yeah.
dozens of others, and they will contract with the carrier for contract basis, and they're W-2 or they're 1099 employees. It all varies.
And they have the same, I guess, ability to write or pay a homeowner. Yeah.
They have the same licensing authority through the state. They have different financial authority through the carrier. So
Okay.
the carrier, yeah, if you're a staff adjuster, they'll tell you you've got X number of dollars you can write, and no one's going to question you. Now they'll look at it later and tell you if you're right or wrong, but you can do it without having to ask a question. If you're an independent adjuster, they sometimes will give you no authority, sometimes they'll give you a small amount of authority. But the claim, when they come in, the carrier that I work for, they just automatically get dispensed to an independent adjuster. If there's a spike that comes in, there's too many claims, hurricane, tornado, hailstorm, then someone in the office will review that and say, well, there's a spike in St. Louis, there's a spike in Dallas. Let's send in a catastrophe adjuster. And then they'll activate me, and then I'll just reroute those claims electronically to go to my inbox. And I'll get an email that says, claim on this house, this address, this policy, and then I just handle it from there.
So will there be a team of cat guys that come in typically, or is it, you, maybe another guy, or does that depend on the quantity that are coming in?
Depends on the quantity, and it depends on the carrier.
Okay.
Some carriers are still more IA focused. My independent adjuster, that's their basis, their primary, and some are more staff focused. Yeah, usually I go in, there's one or two others. The previous carrier I was at, there would be one or two dozen others because they wanted to do everything they could to avoid the independent adjusters, strictly from a cost basis.
Right.
It's just a business model.
IAs and staffers.
Yep. Per transaction, the independent adjusters do cost more to the company, and insurance carriers care about what they call the loss adjusting expense, which is an LAE. And every single time they have to send somebody out, that has a cost. It's more expensive for an independent adjuster. It's less for a staff. And it's even less if they don't send anybody out at all. And so when they can go that route, they will. Which I saw the smile.
We'll get into that in a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to get your perspective on that here shortly. But anyway, So sorry to interrupt and get off on that, but yeah. So go ahead and go through where it lands on someone's desk, be it, yours or an IA, and then where do we go?
So I'll just stick with the model that I'm currently experiencing because it's more fluid that way, and then we can show the differences later. And so once it lands on my desk, I own that claim, as does what they call a desk adjuster. And so when a customer gets the claim with my carrier, I will have the claim. I'll call them. I'll schedule a time, can come meet them and look at the property. And then the office adjuster is also assigned to the claim simultaneously, and they're going to be the ones who handle it through the lifespan of the claim. I'm responsible for scheduling the inspection, looking at the property, writing the estimate, making the payment, and then closing the claim, which is a temporary status. Most carriers, most customers kind of misunderstand that. When it's closed, it's closed forever. It's like a door. You can reopen a door.
Okay.
You can reopen a claim. And so once a claim is closed because the payment's made, it just sits there in limbo waiting for something to reactivate it, which usually comes in when you guys are sending us something that says, hey, it's either done or you missed something. And that reactivates it and reopens the claim.
So when a claim is truly closed, done, paid out, what is the in-house term you would say for that?
Closed. There's no difference between temporarily closed or closed because
So it's kind of closed, really closed.
it's just closed.
Okay.
Okay. So when we send in the certificate of completion, that's issuing the final payment, and we're saying that everything's been accounted for, scope of work is completed, and that closes the claim out.
Closes it again.
Closes it again.
It's probably been closed 2 or 3 times between that time and that open. Closed just means that from the carrier standpoint, there's no adjuster actively working on something.
Okay.
It just means that we're currently done with it. It may never reopen, or it may reopen. That's the question. Just a phone call would reopen the claim in a lot of cases.
Now, is there a time frame on that to where it can be reopened again?
It can always be reopened. There's some states where carriers are hesitant to reopen a claim because that restarts timelines for prompt payment of claims statutes, um, various things based on the state. And so some carriers won't technically reopen it. They'll just make a note in the file that customer called, asked question, answered question, claim remains closed.
Okay. Well, and from that perspective, too, and we run into this a lot, we may get a phone call from a homeowner who filed a claim 6 months, a year ago, insurance came out, or an adjuster came out and partial, maybe bought a slope, bought, X, Y, and Z. And then we go out and like, man, I'm confused by that because, there's a ton of damage on here. Why didn't they go ahead and total it? So from that perspective, as Eric said, what are those time constraints? When does it become a new claim, and how long can you go before you say, hey, no, let's go ahead and let's go back on this previous claim that's already been opened?
So let's use Texas as an example because that's where we are right now. There's 2 timelines that you need to be aware of. Most of the policies are going to list either 180 days or 1 year. And even the ones that list 180 days are really old policies. And most of the carriers have said, let's just make them all 1 year because it's easier for us. You don't have to differentiate between the two. So you have 1 year into the policy terms to address damages under the policy, under the claim. But Texas statute gives you 2 years for an accident homeowner's claim file suit. And so legally, you have 2 years. And the carriers are aware of that. So even the policy says 1 year, if you call them in 18 months and say, look, this is really important and it's a really big deal, most of the time they're going to address it to avoid you activating that 2-year option and filing a suit. And so they're going to take care of it. But some carriers, it varies by carrier, it varies by region, are sticking to the language in the policy that says 180 days or 1 year, and they're just cutting you off and letting you take the next step to go to litigation.
Okay. And that's from date of loss or date of contact?
Depends on how the policy is written. And so it depends is unfortunately a very common answer to give a lot of the questions you have because the policies, some will state have 1 year from date of loss, and some will say you have 1 year from the notice of loss, and it varies. You have to read the policy, and you really have to dig in and read the whole policy, including the endorsements, which modify the language.
The first date of loss, first notice, that's like when you call in, and the notice is when you make the claim, I guess.
So
the claim.
Timeline language would be inception date would be when the policy is written. Inception date. Policy period is the subsequent timeline for it's renewed.
Okay.
And then first notice of loss is the first time the carrier is made aware of damage. whether covered or not. That's the first notice of loss. And then the date of loss is something they'll ask you during the first notice of loss. They'll say, well, when did the damage occur? And they'll have a database of weather events, but if it's not a known weather event, if it's a plumbing burst, they rely entirely on you as the customer to say, it was last Thursday that my plumbing burst. And so they'll put down date of loss on there. And then they overlay that over your policy to see which policy period does it fit.
So
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
if it's a data storm related, they have a database as you mentioned, and they go correlate those events. You can see that area that you're in or your home specifically was in a weather event, and they can help qualify the claim.
And some carriers are actually very proactive. I see this sometimes with, I believe, I'll mention names because it's a common knowledge, public information, but Liberty Mutual is good about this. There's several other carriers that will send you an email. Farmers does this now. Say your area was just affected by a hail event.
Really?
Would you like to file a claim? You'll get a text. You'll get a text and it says click here to respond to open a claim. And so they're getting proactive. They're not shy about getting a claim when they know they have coverage. They'd rather get the information now. It's easier to adjust, easier to reserve payments for, and it's easier for the adjuster to properly identify damage. If you wait 6 months or 18 months, you've got statutes, and you've got weathering that will affect damage recognition, which is a problem.
Yeah. So you are a cat, right? And there are certain events that are considered cat storms.
Yeah.
What is classified as a cat storm and just your generic everyday property claim?
So catastrophe events are always weather related.
Yep.
I can't think of an event where they're not, but really technically what it is it's just a spike in claims.
That's it. It's just a total volume of claims.
Yeah, think of it, it's synonymous with tornado, it's synonymous with hurricane.
Yeah.
But it's really just a spike in claims. If Cheyenne, Wyoming gets 500 pipe burst claims, that's a catastrophe event, and they will deploy the CAT team to that. If it was because one builder built 500 homes wrong and they all blew at the same time, that's not weather related. It doesn't happen that way, but it's always tornado or wind or hail or freeze or earthquake, or it's always weather related.
Which makes sense, but at the end of the day, it really comes down to the volume. I mean, you could have a single tornado touch down in one neighborhood and knock out 12 homes, which is catastrophic.
To those people,
but from an insurance perspective, that's obviously not the case.
The local guys will handle that.
And so from an insurance perspective, and you may or may not know the answer to this, all the various carriers, are there certain thresholds governed by the state that state X amount of claims equal a cat storm? Or is that dependent upon the carrier, what they deem as catastrophic?
Yeah, I have friends, being in the industry for almost 20 years now, I've had friends at most of the major carriers, and I'll talk to them. I'll say, hey, we had a big event in Dallas, and I know carrier XYZ declared an event. Did you all declare an event? No, we don't have enough PIF in that area. And PIF is policies in force. So if you have policies in force in a certain area, you have a higher risk to weather events. And so it's funny, we'll compare notes. I'll call, and my buddy at Farmers told me, well, Round Rock just sent 28 people. I'm like, well, I heard from Progressive that they sent 3. It just depends on how heavy they are in a certain area.
Understood.
And it's amazing how different carriers are heavy in some and light in others. You go 20 miles, and it's the exact opposite.
Huh. Okay. All right. So cat event happens. It's been called in, lands in your desk. You have how many claims? Let's assume it's a cat storm. Obviously, you're there. How many claims would you have that hit your desk on Saturday, Sunday, and you're headed out to, Round Rock?
So a typical cat adjuster, if you're a staff cat adjuster, will get 50, 75, maybe 100 on the really high end up front if they have that many claims. If you're an IA, there's no limit. They could send you 150 claims at one time. It just depends on how many they have and how many they have to get off their plate into somebody else's hands.
And is that due, like, from your standpoint, being the cat guy, you can only be there for you're 2 weeks on and a week off or whatever it may be, so you can only handle so many. And an IA, they're going to work him into the ground.
Yep. That's it. Yeah. So every carrier is a little different. Carrier I'm at now does a 20-day on, 8-day off. Prior carrier did 23 days on, 5 days off. Same 28-day time frame. But if you are a staff adjuster, it behooves them to give you time off because you're going to be there for your career eventually.
Right.
If you're an IA and an adjuster, they will deploy you to an area as long as there's claims, they'll leave you there as long as you can stand it. You could go there for 3 months, 6 months, a year and a half, or just perpetual. It varies by carrier, but the biggest one, will deploy someone to an area and leave them there forever if there's enough claims. They'll never undeploy them.
Yeah. So actually, the way that Adam and I know each other, my brother-in-law, they worked in car audio together, of all things.
Yeah.
I really don't know how you transfer from car audio to adjusting, but I guess because,
Renaissance man.
but the funny thing is, so Chip, my brother-in-law, is now an adjuster as well. He's an IA. But anyway, so I met Adam through Chip years ago. But it's funny, both of them come from car audio to the dark side again. But yeah, what's funny about you guys, they're the most Chip and Adam are two of the most meticulous guys I've ever met in my life. They don't miss anything. Smart as whips. So that's what's scary from a contractor side. Like you can't pull anything over on these. So
Well, and I've met every adjuster, and they're all just like us.
I'm not buying it. Yeah, I've met a handful of them too, Adam. I'm sorry. I'm call BS on that. I'm meeting fewer and fewer of them, but that's for later. Okay, so you've got your 75 claims. Let's go. Now, what are you doing?
Also, it depends on the carrier. So
Yeah.
for my carrier, I'm responsible for all of it pretty much. I will call the customer and schedule the customer. I'll try to figure out how bad their damage is, the severity of the claim, how much time I need to be on site. And after doing it for years and years, you can tell. If it's a hurricane claim, you need more time. If it's a hail claim in Dallas, you need a certain amount of time. Hail claim in Minnesota, you need a different amount of time because they have extra buildings, they have siding. And so after a while of doing it across the country, you kind of get a feel for how much time I need to allocate for each one, and you just schedule them. There are other carriers that the adjuster doesn't schedule anything, and it's done through kind of like picture an Uber system. You go on to Uber, you click in, and you say, I want a guy to pick me up at this time. Goes on a computer, find out who's available, and you give it to them. And so I have other friends who are at a carrier where it's just fed to them. They get up in the morning, and they go, oh, look, I've got 3 claims here, here, and here. And they go to them. It's probably a split 50-50. I think half the carriers are using a version of each. The oldest way of doing it is just giving you a handful of claims and saying, just do them, figure it out.
Yeah.
And I prefer that myself. I don't like it on the front end because it's a lot of phone calls. It's a day and a half or 2 days of phone calls, just calling and scheduling. And you have to learn the region and the area where you are and traffic and all that before you even start. And I've done it well, and I've done it poorly, depending on where I go. And I've learned what poorly looks like and how to avoid that as much as possible in the future. But some things are unavoidable. Sometimes you've got 10 minutes of drive time. Sometimes it's 2 hours every direction. You just got to figure it out.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm trying to think of a specific event we've had here recently, and I just because it's the most recent, like over in Mansfield on the Country Club we talked about last time. You've been on some of those roofs. It was a weird storm, right? I mean, there was some really big stuff, some interesting, I guess, results essentially. So
yeah, I know what you're talking about on that one. And so every event is different, whether especially on a catastrophe team. You're traveling from different areas. Traffic's different. The manufacturing process is different. The materials you'll see are different. Type of damages you'll see are different, which is what you're alluding to on the Mansfield storm. Yeah. And then hurricanes also. Every single one of those is all different. And so specifically on a hailstorm, normally you think of hail as just frozen ice, right? Yeah. It's an ice stone. It's solid. No, yeah, maybe. Sometimes it's a solid piece of ice.
Ice for old fashioned, and you've got your sonic ice.
That's exactly right. The sonic ice is put together and freeze it into the same size ball. It's not as dense. It has more air in it. It's not as solid constructed. So you may have 3-inch hail that's comprised of a bunch of marbles. Yeah. You may have golf ball size hail that's a solid golf ball. And if it's frozen all the way through, it's more dense and it damages the items that hits more badly. And if it's not, if it's a conglomeration of small stones, it can splatter when it hits and just disintegrate, or it can be frozen very solid. It all depends on the uplift and how cold it is up at that higher elevations.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw that. It's been interesting. And we spoke to it. And I don't envy your position at these storms by any means. It was hard for us having these conversations with homeowners. We went out there and said, yeah, we know what you heard. We know what you have in your freezer, but it's not on your roof. And so you as an adjuster coming out and like, look, I've got all these in my freezer. My neighbor across the street just had his roof totaled. there's a lot of factors that go into that, and it's hard being the bearer of that news when they have something tangible in their hand that looks like it could kill them.
It's
So
frozen solid now.
yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
It's hard as a rock.
yeah. But that is a difficult position, and so I've always have I had a contentious relationship with adjusters in the past? Absolutely. Um, but I've also understood, we see what we see, and we tell people all the time that there's no damage up there. But once someone has told you, i.e., a contractor, be it a good contractor or a bad contractor, someone tells you you have damage in your mind, your expectation is you're going to get paid and you're going to get a new roof. So when you come in and have to say, I'm sorry, I don't see it. That's a tough situation. So how do you deal with that? I mean, I know you're into it for sure.
Sure.
How does that
I would say it doesn't bother me because I look at it and I say what's right, and I just go with what's right, and that's why it doesn't bother me. I tell them exactly what they have, what they don't have, and if I come out, I try to teach or treat each one like it's my grandma from Minnesota. I mean, I just love her to death. She's the sweetest lady. She's the sweetest lady. Yeah, I walk up and say, I'm here because I'm licensed in every state I go to. I'm licensed in like 43 states, and I go to that state, and I have a fiduciary responsibility because of my licensure in that state to not only protect the assets of the company to make sure they're paying what they owe, but also to protect the customer. I
Yeah.
equally, I'm equally fiduciary responsible to each one, and so I try to look at it from both points of view, and I'll just tell them exactly how it is. Sometimes it's bad news, and I don't like telling them, but I know that I'm right when I say it, and so it doesn't. I don't really carry much over to the next claim. I just tell them this is what you have. And, this is what I can do. This is what your policy can pay you for,
Yeah.
and we just go from there.
So how do you have that conversation with the contractor who has told this homeowner?
That's a
Is
fun
it
one.
mostly posturing, you think, on the contractor side, trying to get in front of the homeowner, and you're just like that insurance carrier?
I never know the background of the contractor when I meet them, and I don't want to be condescending when I talk to them and try to pull that information out of them. I'm not trying to make them look bad. So I don't know if they're new or just wrong or uninformed, or because honestly, most times I meet them when I disagree with them, I feel like they feel like they're right, and that's a different position that I would take than if I get a sense that they know they're wrong and they're saying something contrary to the truth. I handle those differently, but generally, what I do with a customer at the door, I invite the contractor to come with me, and I have a conversation. I'll say, "Look, um, this was a hail claim. I was called to take a hail. You're going to get two different opinions from two different professionals." This is almost verbatim what I tell them. I say, "Your contractor, I'll point at it, just told you that you have devastating hail damage to your roof. I don't see any damage to your roof. I don't see wear and tear. I don't see hail. Um, you know, whatever the specifics are to that roof, I'll state that." And I said, "Here's what I recommend. You have two different professionals telling you two different things or polar opposites. What do you do with that information? Hire anybody you like to make any repairs and do anything you want to your home, but I suggest you you talk to another roofer and tell them you had a roof that says the roof is trash, it's damaged by hail, it's beyond repair, and it can't be salvaged. And also tell them that you had an adjuster look at it and found nothing. And then whatever they say, have them call me."
So I think that leads kind of to another thing I wanted to talk about, which has become much more prominent on the contracting side of things is supplementing. When I first got into roofing years ago, man, I rarely supplemented, if at all. And it would be something just like a total miss. There are six plumbing boots and there's an eight or something like that. But now, a lot of times there's a ton of items that aren't on a claim, and we have to bring in other people to help us with that at times. So, what does that look like from your side of the desk, and why potentially? And maybe this is just my perception. Why is there so much more? Or why does there appear to be so much more supplementing today than there might have been 5, 10 years ago?
It's a little bit of a loaded question. I can tell you my opinion, and this is one
Take
take
your
on it.
opinion.
Okay. So when I first started, I talked to some of the old timers that have been around for 5 or 10 or 20 years, and they would tell me stories about, we didn't have digital cameras. We would take a Polaroid, take a picture of the house, staple to the paperwork, and say totaled roof because of, and they would write a narrative. They didn't take pictures of all the damage. And companies have evolved with technology for good reason, because I'm sure a lot of stuff was bought that was unsupported because it was just easier. There's no way to back check it. And then as it evolved to where we could support, look, this is what we're paying for. They would give us guidelines, we follow those guidelines, and document it appropriately. When we would, I lost my train of thought entirely. I hope I could avoid that today, but
Now you're
supplement.
so from the
Supplementing. So on the supplementing, the reason why it evolved to supplementing is because originally we would have very few line items. All we would care about was, well, I say we would care about, all the customer cared about was the roof. I have a hail claim for my roof. They come out, look at the roof, and they leave. But those were smaller deductibles back then. This is where my opinion comes in. The deductibles were $250, $500, maybe $1,000, and now the deductibles are more of an auto deductible kind of scenario. And now they're 1%, 2%, 5%. So they're thousands of dollars of deductible. And I would say right or wrong, but technically, officially, it's wrong. Absorbing deductibles is a thing, and you need the collateral in some claims for the carrier, the contractor, to make it a viable claim. They do all this stuff so they can have a $5,000 deductible. That's, I'm not going to speak for them, but they do a lot of absorbing of deductibles, which is not allowed. It's against the law. And so, as they decided they needed more and more on the claim, other than the roof, it pushed both sides to look at in a totality of damage, like what else is hail damage? Is the windows, the extra buildings, the fence, the shed, all these items. And it just became more and more complicated as time went on. And the estimating program we use, that we've been using for 20 plus years, became more detailed. Yeah. And it had more and more and more detail in it, which made a 5-line item estimate.
You have to be a Harvard grad to use exactly right.
Well, it I mean, it's a great program. I love it. It's a really good program. And it's 7 out of 10 major carriers use it. So it's across the board. It's out there. But they've added, I don't know how many thousands of line items since I first started. They just keep adding more detail to it. And because of that, when you go out and look at the claim, in order to make sure that they're fully indemnified, both sides, adjuster and contractor, should be looking for every item they can to put on the estimate. My goal as an adjuster is, this isn't your question, but my goal is to never hear from the customer again. Not because I don't like them, but because I don't have time. And so I spend all my time on the site, talking to them, answering their questions, writing the most detailed estimate I can. And hopefully the next time we hear from them, it's all done. Where's the final check?
Well, I think that's from our perspective too. Like, we want to go out, we want to do the best job we possibly can and not miss anything, or a piece of flashing or a piece of drip edge that could lead to a leak. Like, again, not because we don't like them or whatever. It's just we want to do a great job, and we want to move on to the next one and make sure that they're handled. And that's why I see so much similarity on both sides of the desk here. We're both trying to do a job. There's no reason for it to be contentious. I mean, we can have disagreements, and we can maybe talk about the next thing. It's like, what steps or other outcomes or avenues rather for other outcomes does a homeowner have when maybe you and I do disagree on a roof?
Yeah. So from my point of view, when I come out on a claim, and I'll get your question in a second, but when is a disagreement? When I meet with a customer, I assume the contractor is an extension of that person, because I don't know if they're a brother-in-law, a brother, pastor, neighbor. I don't know who they are to them. So as far as I'm concerned, the contractor and the customer are the same entity, as long as the customer says I'm free to talk to them.
My contractor's here, yeah.
My contractor's okay. I want to address you. I want to talk to you. Make sure that everything's okay. I'm going to make sure there's no questions. And as far as being contentious, I don't see a benefit to it from an adjuster standpoint or a contractor standpoint.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because, like it or not, the adjuster holds the checkbook, and if you piss them off, they might do the wrong thing and shortchange you.
And that's always been my perspective. And when I first got into roofing, I saw it all the time. I mean, you hear crazy stories about them sharing the ladder and the contractor running off the ladder and leaving the adjuster on the roof, or just yelling and videoing. I'm like, man, I don't know. I remember yelling at my mom when I was a kid, and I sure as hell didn't get in my way. I can promise you that. So I've never understood that. But there's always been an avenue for disagreement. Mm-hmm. You can ask for a second inspection. You can put in for a supplement. I mean, you can go as far as a PA or a appraisal. There's multiple ways you can go about hopefully getting the outcome that you want. I mean, again, sometimes you just have a contractor that's told you wrong. We run into that all the time, all the time. But I'm sure you've seen it too. There's bad adjusters out there too, or maybe they had a bad day. It's like cops. Cops get a bad rap a lot of time. Maybe they just came from, I don't know, an abuse call and they're in a bad mood and then they go to a traffic stop. I mean, yeah, they're in a different frame of mind. So
Yeah.
things can happen. It's not supposed to happen, but it does. And the same thing on the contractor side. There's bad guys or maybe not the most educated guys, and things just go wrong.
So I had a FNOL boss who used to tell me, I was like, look, this is not life and death. This is just insurance.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, so you make a comparison to a police officer. You can't make a comparison. They've got life and death.
Absolutely.
The stress under it, it's immense. So I have nothing but utmost respect for those guys.
Somebody takes a ladder up from under you on a roof, you're going to be under a fairly sizable amount of stress.
Yeah, I'll be I got a hat. Just hang out. I'll hang out. I always carry my phone for that reason.
How many phones do you have, Adam?
I have three.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just
You can see it right there. Yeah, you got to have three.
phones and watches. He is covered.
Yeah. I know what time it is. That's for sure. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's there's no reason to be adversarial. I mean, and there will be disagreements. There always
Absolutely.
will, because even within adjusters are very common for calling other adjusters and say, "Hey, I got a question for you. I got this scenario. How would you handle it?" There's I say it's an old saying. It's an old saying within the adjuster world. You could have one claim, one house of damage, and just send out 10 adjusters, one after the other, and you're going to have 10 different estimates.
Yeah. It's not black and white.
Yeah, the same carrier, same guidelines. It'll just be different for whatever reason. They use different line items, they have different measurements, they have different opinions, they subjective, objective. So it's not. If it's going to happen within the ranks of the adjuster side, of course it's going to happen on both sides, on the contractor side. And so that's why the carriers have. If you look at the staffing model for the carrier platform now, we have 2, 3, 4 times as many inside people as we have field people. Let it sink in for a second, because what that means is they handle the claim, and then we wait for stuff to come in. And the workload of the stuff that comes in is much more than the initial.
Yeah.
They're constantly getting questions and supplements and final invoices, and it's a lot of work that goes on after I'm done. It's not done when it's done for me.
Yeah.
It's not done for the customer or the company.
So that's a good question. So do you, like in your scenario, or just generally speaking, do you handle those documents that come in, or does that goes inside, and then how do most carriers work, or is it just a variety?
Varies by carrier. So Nationwide, USAA, Liberty Mutual, when they come in, most of the time when those claims come in, they're handling those cradle to grave.
Okay.
That's how they refer to it. So you handle a claim, a question comes up, you answer that question. But if you're handling it with State Farm, Allstate, or Farmers, or Progressive, they have inside groups that are pretty big. And it's not that the other carriers are big; they just decided to go with a different structure inside, and different reasons. Because who's the best person to answer if you missed something? Well, the person that was there.
Right.
Did you see it? But the flip side is, if you have a differing opinion, who's the best person to ask? The third person, right? If you ask the same person that made the decision, you're going to get the same decision. And so if you want to give an honest representation to the customer from the carrier standpoint, you let a different adjuster look at it. And so that's why I prefer this model. I like it when if you have a question, if you disagree with what I said, ask another adjuster.
Right.
They'll tell you their opinion. But that's why you get as many eyes on it as you can.
That's interesting.
I think that's been my biggest gripe. Here recently, we've had to ask for a lot of second look inspections. And what will happen more often than not is it ends up, with a virtual or the same desk adjuster or whatever. Well, sure, he's already made a determination. He's not going to go against what he initially said. So you're kind of spinning your wheels. So I agree with
You have to put a note in the file that says, "I was wrong."
Yeah.
I mean,
I do that all the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that feels great.
yeah,
Sure.
that's me.
I don't know. I guess something different, because like if you were on a roof with me or for somebody, and then I go back and supplement because I feel that you forgot something, and it goes to the next person who wasn't on that roof with us, who's now looking at some pictures in a file, and they go, "Well, I don't really know if you missed that or not, or I wasn't there. I mean, I don't know if there could be some. I don't know. I don't know what to think about that.
So the
That's
company
It
that used
depends on the person on the inside. Do they have 15 years experience like Adam?
make that call based on, oh yeah, we didn't. There's a picture of the Valley Medal and we missed Valley Medal. That's easy, but just I don't know. I can't think of an example in my head now where it would be kind of conflicting.
usually the experience is heavy on the field staff, not the inside staff. That's just the
Absolutely.
way it goes. People usually progress from inside to outside.
Okay.
They don't normally go the other way. They're looking at it like retirement.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story, and I may have told you this. It was right around the time virtual inspections started happening.
Mhm.
And so the guys would have to call into the desk, and I can hear the desk on the phone. It's on FaceTime or maybe a phone call, and they're snapping pictures or whatever. And the person sitting at the desk said, "Hey, go back. What's that right there? What's that spinning thing right there?" I said, "Are they talking about the turbine?" They didn't know what a turbine was. I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be bad." But then shortly thereafter, the same thing happens. So that shingle right there, what is that? They didn't know the difference between a three-tab shingle and an architectural shingle. And I'm just like, what are we doing here, guys? And thank God it's gotten so much better since then. But to his point, like you get some of these guys at the desk, you're like, man, did they just take the test? Like, have they ever even been on a
And that's the case a lot of times because as far as legal is concerned, part of insurance says you have to pass the licensure.
yeah.
But you guys haven't taken an adjuster's test, but I don't advise it. It's not pertinent to the job. I mean, I've taken it. I studied on Thursday. I took it on a Friday, and I haven't used anything from that information to use my job, and it's not relevant. It's really just rote memorization of things that aren't practical.
Yeah.
It's theoretical kind of stuff. I mean, it is and it isn't, but it's just not stuff that I need to adjust claims. It doesn't talk about estimating, it doesn't about damage, it doesn't talk about materials. It talks about what does the law say and what are the requirements for time limits.
Yeah.
So prompt payment of claims, things like that. Yeah, I know that from the test. But I don't know if that should be a 3-tab or
Yeah.
a laminate or an impact resistant. I don't know any of that because that's not part of the test.
Yeah, those were rough days. Man, this is gonna be a long claim, man. We're not getting paid for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, so from a homeowner's perspective, Adam, I mean, we're sitting here talking a lot about loss, and I think we all know what we consider loss, right? You got hail damage, you got wind damage, I don't know, debris, whatever that could cause problems on the roof. But a lot of times, Eric and I will go out and homeowners like, man, I got granules all over my driveway, and my roof's shiny, and it's bad. Insurance owes me for a new roof. I've been paying for insurance for 20 years. I need a new roof. Is that right or wrong, Adam?
When I hear that from a customer, I try not to acknowledge any of those points. Honestly, I listen to them and I say, yeah, you do have a lot of granules on the ground. Because if I tell them, not my opinion, but if I tell them what I learned, what I know about this, I don't want them to think that I've made up my mind that you don't have any damage.
Yeah.
Because it's going to sound like I'm telling them no before I even look at the roof. I'll put my ladder up and look at all the granules off. I'm like, yep, it's a lot of granules off. Well, it could be different reasons. When they make these granules and they make the shingles, there's an extra amount of granules on there. When you open the bag, granules fall out, right? And you put them on, as it weathers, it sheds granules over its life. When hail comes through, it will knock off a bunch more, but unless it's damaged, this is really going to open up a can of worms. Unless it's damaged the mat, it's technically not damaged. The mat and shingles, asphalt shingles, which cover most roofs.
This is a whole nother episode.
I know it is.
A whole nother episode.
You got
Yeah.
you got fiberglass, you have asphalt, you have granules on there. And the reason why they put the granules on there is just to protect the asphalt from the sun. You put a blacktop road down, it's solid black day one, and you watch it age every day, it turns gray. It almost turns white when it's 15, 20 years old.
It's been damaged by hail. They open
It's damaged by UV exposure. Anything petroleum based is damaged by UV. It's a fact. Tires, rubber, anything like that does that. And so granules slough off over time because they're just pressed on there with the asphalt. There's not a whole lot holding most of them on.
So does insurance owe for that?
No, not just for granule loss. No.
Why not?
Well, because
I'm a homeowner. Explain to me why you don't owe me for my old roof.
Because the policy says it owes you for sudden and accidental. Sudden and accidental. The accidental part we can agree on, but the sudden you can't because you didn't suddenly lose all these granules. You lost them over a period of time.
That's right.
But it's sudden accidental damage. And then it also lists, hail is on there. And so hail really looks like on there is not an even coating of granules being lost. It's a smack right in the spot. And you've got some knocked in, some granules knocked into the mat, and some knocked off, and potentially damage to the mat.
Right.
Most policies don't differentiate between cosmetic, functional, not functional. Some do, but most don't. And so now we just look at it and say, can I tell if hail has hit this? And if I feel a bruise in the mat, I feel those granules knocked off, then most carriers will say that's hail damage.
So I think the harder part, or at least from my perspective, that homeowners don't understand. I have a leak in my house. Leaks pop up, and it's sudden for sure.
There you go.
But what I see a lot, and Eric probably sees a lot too, it is so rare that a leak is actually caused from hail damage. More often than not, and tell me if you agree with this or not, it's wear and tear. And that's a really hard message to deliver to a homeowner, is that this has been an ongoing problem that you didn't realize until it was too late. So what is insurance's stance on that? And if you want to explain my scenario better, I know you can, but if you would.
Yeah, so you're exactly right. I mean, as far as hail causing a leak, the same event, sometimes the rain doesn't even occur in the right order for the hail to have caused a leak.
Right.
Sometimes it's the next rain.
Yeah.
But even then, it doesn't usually cause a leak. Usually when I see a leak from hail, it's because of two things. Hail has impacted either a valley or a ridge hard enough to break the fracture of the mat, and usually it's a valley because you have more water there, and they didn't put the preferred valley membrane under it. They just did the required standard felt under there. And yeah, when you get it hit in that valley where it has a nice curve, and it has the most impact because there's water collecting, it'll come in there. Generally, if you get an impact on the roof from hail, you don't get a leak there for years.
Yeah.
If you ignore it.
Right.
It's just not something that normally occurs.
Yeah.
And that's the normal hailstorm. I mean, of course, if you're in California versus Texas versus Florida, the normal hailstorm is different. We can get golf ball every year, and
Right.
golf ball in some parts of the country is unheard of. We can get cantaloupe.
Yeah.
We can get massive stuff. Now it's going to leak with that.
Yeah,
That's
different.
That's not normal.
Right. But more often than not, it's, a squirrel chewed on a lead boot or chewed up in the fascia, and you get a wind-driven rain. And it's hard for people to understand that. I have water coming in my house. You owe me for that.
Insurance owes me for that.
And it depends.
Depends.
Right? It depends on the policy. There are some carriers, and I won't throw the names out that I know of that do this, but there's two schools of thought, two types of policies that most policies fall into. One says sudden and accidental damage, unless excluded. And most of those don't say rain leakage from a single event is excluded. So if you get a spot on your ceiling from a single event, you don't have like 15 concentric circles of stain knowing there's something going on for 2 years. A single stain, that's covered under most policies. Some carriers take the other approach, which is water damage from rain is not covered unless there's a storm created opening.
Yep.
And you don't see it as often, but it's out there. And it's not something they market. They don't tell customers, oh, by the way, we're a storm created opening company. Yeah. Watch out for that. Yeah.
Well, and that's an interesting piece. I think a lot of homeowners have a hard time getting that or understanding it, maybe even appreciating it. Is there's no interaction between you and an agent, right? The agent who writes the policy, that is essentially a total separate entity from claims.
Yeah, and it's done that way for a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason, there's a line there because you're selling something and we're inspecting it. And if there's too much overlap, you can have conflict of interest kind of stuff going on. And it's hard to explain what those are, but they separate them because the agents are the ones who are representing the customer.
Right.
Right. Only. I mean, they do represent the company with their name on the letterhead and things like that, but they're an agent. I mean, look at the definition of agent. They're an agent of the customer, not an agent of the company.
Yeah.
I have a duty responsibility to both to write it up to make sure that I'm paying for what we owe, and I'm responsible to the Department of Insurance.
Yeah.
But the company pays me.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, I mean, I've heard it a number of times. People are like, "Oh man, I'm paying my agent as soon as this claim's done because it's been such a horrible process," or vice versa. I mean, it's just like, no, it's not one and the same. They're
You know, my mother and father-in-law just built a new house, and they texted me the other day and said, "Who should we go with for insurance?" I said, "Well, based on the home you built, it's a really expensive house, and I said you should go with either Chubb or Pure.
Yeah,
Because they're concierge insurance.
Yeah,
But
you're gonna pay for it.
you're gonna pay for it
You're gonna
exactly."
pay for
I said everybody else, with a few exceptions. I mentioned the exceptions. I won't mention them now because there's no reason for that. But for the most part, everything else is a crapshoot.
it. It is.
I would say review your coverages. Let me look at what you're getting. I make sure you don't have voids and gaps. But you never know.
Yeah.
You never know what adjuster is going to show up. If they're going to be a licensed adjuster on the site, if they're going to be a vendor. I'm surprised you haven't hit on this yet. The unlicensed inspector.
Hold tight there, little buddy. It's coming. But no, you're absolutely right. I say that because we get asked the same thing all the time. You work with all the various carriers. Like, who's the best? And the thing I will say, and it probably comes to Brad. I mean, again, everybody in this room knows Brad. He's just a really good agent. I want someone who represents me, who understands what I need and how to protect me. I want to be able to call the same person every time, and he understands where I'm coming from. Whether I'm right or wrong, he understands, what my complaints are, what my needs are, and he can fight for those needs. And so there's certain carriers out there that it's a 1-800 number. You're never going to get the same person. And at least from my perspective, and this is one man's perspective, it's like I just want that representation. So when somebody asks me, who's the best insurance agent, I said, for me, it's someone who I know I can talk to every single time. There's great carriers out there, and I mean, but to your point, you don't know what you're going to get on your roof or on your property, with a flood or maybe you just don't know. It is a total crapshoot. So you got to figure out, I'll tell you this: if you're shopping price, it's that old adage. You get what you pay for. And so in the case of Pure and Chubb and that, you pay a premium, but it's a concierge.
I've seen them take care of their customers. They're really good.
Yeah.
The carriers are it's tough. I mean, put your hat on backwards here for a second, be an insurance adjuster for a second, or be an agent, and think about how do you want to sell your policies? Some companies sell online, some sell it through an exclusive agent, some sell it through an independent agent who can have multiple carriers. And there's pros and cons to every one of those. And a lot of that is generational. We're all pretty much in the same generation here. I'm probably the oldest.
Oh, look at Eric. Definitely. Look at that. Look at that. Man, you probably can't even hear us right now.
We prefer agents, right? That's our group. We prefer to be able to call someone and say, "Hey, I have a problem. Help me out here. This is your domain." But the younger generations, they don't talk to people on the phone. They don't want to build a relationship.
And I get that perspective, but it's flawed. I'm sorry. And I'm the old guy. I'm the old guy. But if you don't know what you're paying for and you don't have someone who can explain it to you, because it's flawed. And I'm going out on a limb. It is flawed. You've got to have somebody who's going to represent you and be able to explain to you what you're getting. Because a lot of those who are out just buying it online, they don't know the difference in a 1% and a 2% deductible and all your added perils and the things you're talking about. And so, and maybe that is a young man's game until you have a claim. And then you figure out what you have or don't have.
Right. Maybe that's how they learn.
It's a hard lesson to learn. At times, like all the people who went through Snowmageddon a couple of years ago who potentially had total losses. That's definitely a hard lesson to learn.
Well, and there's no guarantee, and I'm not trying to bash anybody here because you mentioned Brad. He's awesome. But there are agents, just like adjusters and contractors, that aren't great at what they do. And
don't have a clear understanding.
I work for a carrier that only an exclusive agency system. Over and over and over, I would hear, "Well, my agent didn't tell me that." So there's no guarantee that you're going to get the information you need just because you have an agent.
Right.
Either way, you have to have very intuitive yourself. You have to dig in the information. So if you're lucky enough to get Brad, it's great. But if not, then you're still having to do the research. So it's cheaper to go online and buy it. I'm not plugging this, but that's what carriers are looking at. It's like, if it's just as good either way, it's cheaper to sell it online. And they can give you a lower premium, theoretically.
Yeah, everything comes down to the almighty dollar, right? All right, so we've been going for a minute. this could probably go all day. Um, so, so a couple things. Let's touch on it briefly, and this is the one that could last forever. Is a lot, if not most, of the carriers now aren't even sending adjusters out.
Yeah, it's just
Explain that.
so
Yeah,
even the company I work for, who sends me out, I'm a staff adjuster. I work for them, W-2 employee. Most of our claims are handled by an independent adjuster or a vendor.
vendor. So
Vendor.
let's focus on vendor.
Yeah. Focus on vendor. That's the fun one, right? There are companies out there, and I won't mention names, but and they're good companies for what they do, but they've tried to figure out what other services can we offer the insurance industry. They started off giving ladder assists for adjusters who didn't have a two-story ladder or a steep roof, and now they're offering more and more services. Some of those services are inspection services, interior, exterior. Uh, they're documenting the damages. The state regulates insurance in America, not the federal government. Every state is the Department of Insurance, and that state says pretty much across the board, they all say you have to be licensed to adjust a claim, except for states that say we don't require that. They list that out. Um, most all
Texas is not one of those states.
Texas is one that requires a license, right? So just talking about Texas, which is
For adjusters, not for contractors. Unfortunately, that's
on,
another
right?
show.
Yeah. There are some states the opposite. The adjusters aren't required, the contractors are. Funny. And then if you go to Illinois, you can be a PA and a contractor on the same claim. It's even better.
Oh, there's no double dipping or anything.
No. Go back to the original. The vendors, they offer these services for inspections. And as long as there's a licensed adjuster reviewing the damages, they don't have to be on site. They can do that virtually. They can do that over the phone. They can take your word for it. They can, because a lot of claims, small stuff, they'll call in and say 100 feet of fence blew over. Okay. Your deductible's 500, 100 feet of fence in our area is 1,500. Here's $1,000. No photos, nothing. Those claims just go away. They've never gone to the field, never looked at. The next level of severity goes up, and they say, it's a hail claim. It's all exterior. I have no leaks. Depending on how the carrier routes their claims, some automatically go to an IA, some automatically go to a staff adjuster, some go to me. It depends on how they route them. Some go to a desk adjuster who have the authority to make the call how it's handled in the field. They can send it to a staff adjuster or an IA who's licensed or an unlicensed vendor. And the Department of Insurance doesn't care how you do it as long as the person is licensed.
Yeah.
It's legal.
It's legal. No, it absolutely is. And in theory, it's a great system.
Because it's all about reducing expenses. Because the carrier will promote that. If we can adjust your claim for less, pay you what we owe, but cost less to us, we'll charge you fewer premium dollars.
In theory.
Great, right?
In theory. Yes, it is great in theory. If I'm one of the higher ups.
If you're the man, then it's great, yeah.
But it goes right. We spoke about it earlier when I first started doing this. And man, we talked about it last episode, man. We file a claim on Monday, adjuster out on Wednesday, I'm roofing by Friday, and we're done. And now it's file a claim in March.
What year was that?
Yeah, it's been a minute, Adam. Not as old as Eric, but I've been in it for a minute. But now it's a 3-month process. And it is a process. And again, I think what happens is, the guys on the roof, you've probably seen some of them, the adjusters that are going out. Man, I don't know where they find these guys, but so one, I don't trust the photos they're taking.
You're talking about the third party,
the vendors. And then if and when that information even gets turned in, I mean, I know it has to eventually, but it's troubling. And the items, and it started out, I guess the first real virtual thing that I encountered was the drones. And so they would send a drone pilot out and take all these pictures and send it to a desk. Well, as well as I do. I mean, are they looking at the felt? You got to lift the shingle up to the felt. Is there valley metal? You can't see valley metal 9 times out of 10 on a roof. So there's, all kinds of ancillary items other than just the shingles that go in a claim. And I find when that bit of information gets transferred to an actual adjuster, there's so many things that get missed, and therefore it goes to the supplement process. And because, like you were saying earlier, it's not the same person more often than not. This guy leaves or gets deployed or whatever. You're dealing with 3, 4, 5 different people all the time. It's a struggle. On the contractor side, it's a struggle. So it's just, I get it and I understand the cost savings, but there's just I don't feel, again, my opinion, that it's in the best efforts to serve the policyholder.
Well, the cynical contractor,
You're saying
the cynical contractor might think that this was intentional. I might say that this was a plan. And looking at it mathematically, it adds up. It delays everything. It stretches it out. And what are the odds, right? I mean, if you pay 100 claims for a drone and you can't see the felt, to your point, it could be 30 pounds, it could be 50, it could be ice and water, it could be ice and valley metal, it could be all kinds of stuff you can't see. It could be a 3, or it could be a 50, it could be impact resistant. You can't tell any of that. And it pushes, and this is the part that I don't like, because I prefer to go in the field. When I'm given the option of virtual or field, I push back every time in the field. I always want to go in the field because that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Licensed, qualified, field adjuster every time.
Yeah.
But that's the most expensive way to do it. So I can't argue against the cost savings when they can figure out ways to do it and still do it right. But out of 100 claims that are looked at with a drone, how many times will people not ask for the other stuff? How many contractors will look at it and say,
it comes
you
out
missed
the almighty dollar,
but I
Yeah,
get it done.
I get that.
They have, but don't you feel that they have a fiduciary responsibility as well to?
Well, that's why
that is what that policy is for. That policy is there to ensure that the homeowner is covered in the event of a loss.
Yeah.
And that, what you just said there, and that I don't know that it's true or not, but that goes against the bottom line. And that's where I take issue with it, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm a homeowner. We're all homeowners sitting here today, and if something happens, I want to know that I am fully covered,
protected, right?
And that's what insurance is there for. So anyway, it's a long conversation. It's like talking religion or politics. I don't know that we're ever going to get to the bottom line of it, but it's.
And honestly, as a homeowner, you need a team to make sure it's done right.
You do.
An adjuster,
Yeah,
and a good contractor who will all act in their best interest.
Right.
And a contractor has a clear understanding. I mean, just like an adjuster who needs experience, you need a contractor. Now, this is a plug for 10 Gate Roofing, who knows the right people to work with and understands all the processes to get where you need to go as a homeowner. But anyway, yeah, that's a longer conversation. So, man, we've been going for an hour. I never thought in a million years we would ever be able to talk for an hour. So I want to end it with this, and I sent you this in advance, but tell me the wildest thing that's ever happened with you, a homeowner, or you or a contractor that you were just like, man, I don't know what I've gotten myself into, and we'll leave it at that.
Ooh,
Make it
boy.
memorable.
Okay, so I had one of my first deployments with the previous carrier. I was in California. Not my favorite place to work. Love to visit there, but some of the customers are challenges. We'll just say that challenges. Yeah, during the same 3-week deployment, I got nominated for Employee of the Year and my job was threatened at the same time. So, for the one claim,
Stuff to do.
I got it. I did it. Same 20-day time frame. So these 2 claims were the one is really sad. I'll with that one. It was a claim. I just get the policy information. It says Mr. and Mrs. name and phone number. I call him and it's his son. And I'm like, oh hey, I was calling dad. He died. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. It happens sometimes because people don't let us know.
Yeah.
But he died during the storm. Yeah, it's really, really bad deal. He had a big wind event, blew half his roof off. Elderly gentleman who wanted to move from one side of the home to the other because it was raining in his house. So he tried to drag his mattress over, and unfortunately, he had a heart attack. He died. And the son, who lived in Sacramento, and the daughter lived in San Diego, he lived in LA. They both had to drive in and help take care of everything, the claim, the funeral, everything. And he was also somewhat of a worker. And so when I got there, this is early in my career, and I mentioned earlier, you learn questions to ask and areas and what to do. Yeah, and I didn't ask enough questions on that one. And so I got there on a Saturday, and I immediately said, sir, I have not allocated enough time to handle your claim properly. I've got Saturday off. I want to spend all day with you on Saturday because we had to go through all his personal property. It was all water damage. And so he's like, well, he ordered a dump truck to show up in the yard. He was going to put undamaged, damaged keeping for whatever reason, and trash. And I had to document all of this, but it took all day. So I helped him unload the home into the dumpster to do that. And that was the one I was nominated for good job. Yeah. The other one, I went in, it was straightforward, but it was like a $4 million home on the cliff, and it had this tile roof. And if you got a $4 million home, you probably got a couple of dollars in the bank. You probably know some people. And I went in and said, well, you've got water in 7 rooms, and you don't have any storm damage on the roof. You don't have a storm created opening. You have a leak. You have water ponding, and it's not covered. I'm sorry. And she said, I know the vice president of the company you work for, and if you don't pay for this, I'm going to have you fired. And I said, well, all right, policy says this, and this is what we can do. And so I left. And then my boss said, yeah, you really probably called us on that one, let us know. And they just sent someone in, and they just paid for it, even though it was totally against policy.
Wow. Politics, man.
It's all politics.
Politics.
It's all politics. And when my boss told me, he's like, you didn't do anything wrong, but the next time someone says that, immediately call me as you walk out of the door so we can handle it, because there's a business reason to handle it.
Well, that's good to know. I'm going to start throwing that around a lot whenever there's trouble.
You know the vice president?
Yeah. Do you know who I know? Yeah.
That's what you said. Do you know who I am? Do you know this person? I'm like, yeah, I heard of him. He's a boss. It's like, I'm pretty sure he would want me to.
His name's on my check.
Yeah, he told me to do it this way.
Well, Adam, man, thank you so much for spending the time. I hope this was eye-opening for homeowners, other contractors. And again, I think the ultimate goal of having you on with us here is like, man, we're all doing a job. There's no reason for us to argue. There's no reason we can't all get along. I think we're just all trying to do the right thing for the homeowner, for the company that we work for, or whatever. So it's there are other ways we can go about doing things other than arguing and bickering, and maybe that goes a little deeper than just contracting, but life in general. We can all have a conversation. So that's why I wanted you here, and I'm really grateful for knowing you as a human being and for helping us out. And if there's anything you'd like to leave us with, please do.
No, it was a pleasure being here. I'm glad you asked me. Maybe I'll come back if you have any more questions we can work on. We didn't even talk about fraud. That's one of my favorite things.
Okay. That's in one of your many acronyms on the back of your name. We do need to talk about that. So, all right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to episode 2, or is this 1 now that we have a name and logo? This is 2.
This is 1, 2.
All right, Utah, make it 2. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.